Hello, Matt.
Hey, Bill.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing about as good as can be expected on a week of covering 2 debates and a State of the Union address. Thank goodness the debate last night, Thursday night, they actually held it at 8 o'clock, or they started it at 8 o'clock.
So the kids could watch. A family-friendly debate.
This whole, what people don't understand is it's like Monday night football. If it starts at 9, then it's going to end at midnight. But you don't flip off the TV and go to sleep at midnight because
you're all wired.
You're too wired. You know, if the Redskins are playing, then they lost, but in the last 10 seconds, and so and then if you're covering it, you have to actually write something at that point. So I mean. This is really eating into my beauty sleep time, and I'm not happy.
Well, before we get into the debate in full, we have a minor announcement to make.
This is not a minor announcement.
It's a major announcement.
It's a major.
It is huge breaking news.
All right, so it's a medium announcement.
So we are going to change the name and the premise of this Blogging Head show. And not call it the Weekend Blog, and call it something else. So that's more about two good friends on different sides of the ideological spectrum having a lovely conversation about politics once a week.
All right, but say it's going to be so lovely because I do want to challenge you because I don't really think we're changing the premise of the show. I think that the show has evolved,
right?
And we are actually changing the name of the show to better reflect what this has become. Now, by the way,
we didn't leave the show. The show left us.
Just like Reagan said. But there may be a Weekend Blog show, still.
Right.
So, but what you and I do, this thing we've got, this crazy thing this crazy thing we do, has evolved over time, and it started off like you would say, this is what the left, this is what Daily Kos is saying, this is what Move On is saying, this is what. And I would, someone, Guy at townhall.com writes this, and Byron New York at National, and it was, but it sort of evolved over time into us really talking about politics and our insights, and, you shining light on what liberals think and progressives, and me sort of shining light on, my ideas and what I think conservatives think.
And this is basically the only place in the entire universe, TV, radio, online, where two people from opposite sides of the spectrum have a pleasant conversation about these topics.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And not only pleasant, but I would also throw in substantive.
Yeah.
We have time to talk. And honestly, Bill, I felt like over the past year or so, some of the blog stuff that we threw in was a bit perfunctory. It probably, our best stuff has probably always been you and I just, let Scher be Scher kind of
right.
thing. And then the perfunctory would be like, got to get back to the blog thing because that's the name of the show. So I'm not saying, obviously we could talk about blogs at some point, but I don't think we're not going to feel compelled or chained to it.
So but we want to complain that we talk about Eric Erickson all the time. Now we can stop doing that.
Yeah, I read those comments, by the way. Very hurt by that. But we want the audience to help, right? So what we've got some ideas already, so we could throw it out for new ideas. But what were some of the ideas that you
for the name of the show? We haven't decided what the name of the show should be. My idea, my top idea is the DMZ, the demilitarized zone of political chatter. That's my big idea.
Right, and that would be an obvious hearkening to the fact that you and I talk about ideas. We debate big ideas in politics, but we don't fight in the sort of crossfire. From the left, I'm Paul Begala. From the right, I'm Tucker Carlson. We don't it's not a crossfire show. Right. That frankly those things work on TV. Because people kind of like conflict, and we're going the opposite direction. So, if you like the DMZ, let us know. I had, we could do like Bill and Matt's Excellent Adventure. We could do we could do. You mentioned like softball, which I think is maybe a negative connotation.
Right.
There.
It wasn't my best.
We
idea.
do not your best idea. I had an idea of something like navel gazing with Bill and Matt, because we do. This is inside baseball.
Right.
Maybe that's instead of hardball, inside baseball. I mean, this is not like, I don't think your average person flipping the channels would like this show, but people who are political junkies might love it, because we're going to give you a behind-the-scenes look at politics and whatnot.
Right.
Well, any other ideas, Bill, that we bandied about?
I mean, we go very simple. The Matt and Bill show. There was one other idea that I had, and the name's escaping me.
But we want to summon you, the viewer, to rise to the occasion. This is your chance. There are no prizes. We do need to get
We
some
could
swag.
give out, free copies of the fantastic book "Wait, Don't Move to Canada" by Bill Scher.
That.
You could pay 99 cents on Amazon, or you can get a free copy for naming the show. I mean, that's a huge incentive right there.
And I would say this too: whatever name we come up with, I think we should get some swag created. Like, even if we have to chip in ourselves, or if we have to ask our audience here.
You can do that stuff on Cafe Press for no money at all. They just take a big cut.
We could do that, right?
Yeah.
Cups, T-shirts, thong underwear. I mean, the Daily Caller has them. Why can't
Exactly.
we? So anyway, let us know. Let us know your idea. What should we name it? And also, what do you want to hear more of? Like, let's maybe throw this out there. So we've been doing this for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, right, Bill? What do you like? What don't you like? And let's try. Don't be mean. Don't be snarky. But like, seriously, like, is there something that you really like when we talk about, and you really don't like when we don't talk about, or that we do? Whatever. How can we might as well like throw that out too and fine tune this as we go.
So put that all on the thread. I know the folks don't usually hold back, so I'm not worried about getting ideas. But let's put it all on the thread. And should we proceed to our normal chit chat?
Let me just close by saying again, I think I'm correct in saying that we don't know. This doesn't necessarily mean the weekend blog is going away.
Right.
I don't know the answer to that, but you and I, our thing specifically, is going to, again, I think it's more of an evolution and making the name fit what we've actually been doing now for about a year. So, having said that, what do you want to talk about?
Well, this debate last night, was a real buzzkill for me. I was very excited about, I read a quote from Newt earlier in the day. We had this fantastic riff about how Romney was this fake Reaganite. How dare this guy who voted for a Democrat in '92, who said he wanted to not go back to Reagan Bush when he ran for Senate. How dare he attack my Reagan credentials? And he made an allusion to that at the debate last night. So that he didn't bring it up, but I just thought that Gingrich was sort of locked in and ready to just tear him apart. And it was going to ride that to a win in Florida, and the party would be in a total panic, and there would be a big push to get Jeb or Christie or someone else to jump in and have a big broker convention. And now it looks like
which would serve your evil purposes, right?
What's that?
This would play into your ulterior motives.
Yes.
Which is to push your brokered convention website.
My ulterior motives. Why is nobody thinking about me and your party?
Maybe, and by the way, maybe that could be the name of our show, Ulterior Motives with Matt and Bill. But what's the name of your website?
Well, I started brokerconventionnews.com. I've been tracking all the chatter of broker convention news, and it's actually quite interesting because you have sort of 3 separate tracks of interest for it. You have the Republican elites who are worried about either candidate being weak against Obama. You have the Tea Party conservatives who are worried that no one is pure enough for them. And you have the Ron Paul folks who are suggesting that a broker convention would give their guy the chance to play a kingmaker role. And so everyone's throwing all these different theories and different strategies and hopes and dreams. And so I wonder if there could still be a push for it if Romney gets it, because the Paul folks and the Tea Party folks will still be displeased, one thinks. But I thought someone's got to win more than one contest for there to be a mathematical reality of a broker convention. If Romney keeps winning contests, you can't have it.
Right.
So
That made me sad. And it looks, based on last night, of course, I mean, this is not breaking news, but Gingrich did not have a great debate, so he sort of needed to win Florida. I think we probably agree on that.
I want to hedge it a little bit just because the race has been so weird and conventional wisdom gets amended so often. But to date, Gingrich has been a total one-trick pony, browbeat the moderator, get the crowd amped up, and make that seem like I'm a champion debater who can take on Obama. And so when he doesn't have those moments, he didn't have him in New Hampshire. He lost New Hampshire. Yeah. He had a 3-week gap between his last good debate in Iowa and the race. He fell apart in Iowa.
See, let me make this. I don't know if I made this point last time or not. I think I talked to someone about this, but I use a sports analogy. They said that hitting is streaky. If you're a baseball team, you can go into a slump. A team can go into a slump where they just don't hit. But defense isn't streaky. Defense is consistent, and I think part of Gingrich's problem is that Gingrich wins by great moments and great debates, but you can't count on that.
Right.
Romney wins by blocking and tackling, having a good organization, having infrastructure, which is not streaky.
Right.
So if it's a good day or a bad day, Romney's operation kicks butt. But Gingrich's strengths, you wake up one day and you're creative and you've got energy, and you wake up the next day and you're sort of depressed and you don't. So I think that Gingrich is much more susceptible to kind of the whims of, is the audience allowed to applaud, or does the debater ask the right question that you needed? Whereas I think Romney's strengths are just more consistent because they're not based on personality or, the stars aligning.
Right. I agree with all that. I think the still unknown, the remaining question with Romney in this is, was last night's debate a turning point for him that toughened him up and helped him figure out how to handle the types of critiques he would get in a general election in regards to his wealth, his treatment of the tax code, his business strategies? Did he figure out to talk about that in a comfortable, respectable way? Or are there still lots of weaknesses there, and he just hasn't? Because I think you argue this both ways. There's certain ways he certainly was better about it than he has been in the past. On the other hand, there's still plenty of openings I think people saw that Gingrich and Santorum just didn't take.
Or they wouldn't work in a Republican primary. Right. So, for example, I think it is very clear that Romney has become a much better debater, and that Gingrich's attacks have, I think, sharpened, made Romney tougher and a better arguer. Having said that, I do think that you make a good point, Bill, which is to say that some of the things that Romney has, some of the crutches that he has developed in order to fend off attacks in a primary wouldn't necessarily work in a general. So, for example, when Romney says, well, I talked to my trustee, and this was I had this in a blind trust, and my broker is sure. As I tweeted last night, I need to call my trustee, which is an obvious joke. Who has a trustee? Right. Now that may not hurt him in a Republican primary, but I would imagine that in a struggling economy, in a general election, when you're playing to swing voters in Rust Belt states, that having a nominee talking about his trustee and his money, I didn't know that I made all that much. Right. It was in a blind trust. To me, that's going to be a dissonant sound.
Right. Although, I wasn't as, from my perspective, hopeful that would be a weak spot for him. Sure, maybe a little off-putting, but I think at this point, the guy is very wealthy. And I think the average American can accept that, hey, wealthy people have different financial arrangements than regular people do. That doesn't automatically mean he doesn't get me. He could still find a way to communicate that. I thought the biggest glaring thing was, this was the first time in a debate when, as far as I know, that the media outlet sponsoring it literally did a fact check in the middle of the debate A candidate made a demonstrably false statement. The researchers, went on the Google, found out he was wrong, and brought it back to the debate and said, hey, by the way, buddy, you were totally wrong.
Right. And by the way, let me say, I don't want to go back to the Weekend Blog thing, but Huffington Post has a good piece up today. Mitt Romney's struggle with the truth continues. Right. They point out two of the most egregious falsehoods he told.
Right. So one was that he claimed that he didn't know, or at the bare minimum, I mean, it's not quite a lie, but he's like, I don't know if that's my ad, but your voice is on the ad in Spanish, no less.
Saying, I approve this, my name is Mitt Romney, and I approve this ad. The other thing was, the Fannie, we were just talking about Fannie and Freddie. He said that the investments were not in a blind trust. Right. According to National Journal, that is not true. Right. There were actually 5 that I counted. 5 things that Romney said which were just not true.
Well, but the blind trust
and by the way,
it's
easy. How do you win a debate against somebody if they just deny a fact? And then I'm sure if you're a Gingrich, you're like, well, maybe my people got it wrong. Right. I mean, I think that Romney got out of some bad trouble by basically lying.
Right. But I could understand. I mean, Gingrich was stupid to push that point if he had money in Fannie and Freddie too. That's just an idiotic thing on his part. So Romney essentially has the advantage of being next to a complete moron.
I don't necessarily agree with that though, because Gingrich isn't at that moment saying that being involved with Fannie and Freddie is a disqualifier. Romney's the one setting up that premise that because you were involved in Fannie and Freddie and consulted for them, that you're somehow disqualified for being president.
He had to acknowledge that up front, and not he was open to saying you're the hypocrite here. Yeah. You have money in Fannie and Freddie too. I mean, Gingrich took it a step farther and said by having money in Fannie and Freddie, you are culpable for people's foreclosures.
Right. Yeah, he could have. He might have been able to set it up in a more effective way that would not have made him susceptible to that comeback. And Romney's very good at the comeback. Right. I think people underestimate him because he kind of has a wimpy George H.W. Bush thing going. But Romney is very good at kind of bitch slapping people back. I don't know what it is. He's very good at that.
But to go back to the radio ad thing, I mean, so here it is. CNN has completely humiliated and busted him in prime time, and not a peep from Gingrich or Santorum about it. I mean, that's crazy. Why would you go to town on that guy at that point? So he just goes to the
missed opportunity. But I do have to say too, I think the last few debates. You remember the debate where Gingrich went after John King about asking about his wife and the open marriage thing. That debate, Gingrich won it in the first 5 minutes. I tend to think Gingrich lost this one in the first.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And so the CNN thing that you're talking about, that came about halfway through the debate.
But what a great opportunity to get that momentum back. Yeah. I mean, I can't think of a more humiliating moment in debate politics that was just left on the table, unsaid.
And maybe that becomes an ad, and maybe that does change the narrative and make the debate ultimately less successful. Romney said something else last night that I thought was a really bad line that could potentially be used against him when Rick Santorum was hitting. And by the way, Rick Santorum actually, I think, won the debate on points at least. He had a great night. I think here's a topic for another day. It's interesting that evangelical candidates like Bachmann and Perry seem to be very much unable to rhetorically make the case for faith, whereas I think Santorum, a Catholic, much more comfortable, much more eloquent talking about that issue. But more on point, Santorum was bashing Romney about the individual mandate and Romney Care, and Romney actually says back to him, "Well, it's nothing to get mad about," Which I mean, to a lot of conservatives at least, supporting socialized health care is in fact something worth getting mad about.
So I'm curious if you have a sense of what conservatives are saying in general. Do they looking at this debate and saying, "Hey, Romney's getting better. This process is strengthening him the way Obama got strengthened by a protracted debate with Hillary Clinton. That's good for us in the general. I feel more comfortable now. Even if I have my problems with him, I feel comfortable. He's still going to take a good fight to Obama, or all these other things that we're flagging here, are conservatives latching onto those and saying, hey, Romney still has a lot of not just policy weaknesses, but political weaknesses that Obama's going to exploit?
I think a couple of things are at play here. On one, I think that anybody who's intellectually honest tends to think that these debates are helpful for whoever the nominee is. Some people who are in the tank for one candidate or the other may think that these attacks are damaging the guy who's going to be the nominee anyway. But I think that most people, most objective observers, think and realize that this, just like Obama, will make him stronger. There is an interesting dynamic that has emerged between the people who like Gingrich and the people who like Romney. And this has not been widely talked about. Actually, Chris Matthews on Hardball Thursday night had Jonathan Martin on, and it made some interesting points about like the kind of people who go to a Romney rally tend to be people who are like business people, well off. He mentioned the people who go to a Gingrich rally tend to wear American flags and have fanny packs, as he put it. I think that that there is a dichotomy, a division between the people who are Romney backers and the people who are sort of like establishment Bush types tend to like Romney. The people who are more populist, grassroots conservative, Tea Party, Sarah Palin, Mark Levin, Eric Erickson, and I would say a lot of Reaganites, whatever. I think we haven't settled on it. Reaganites.
After 3 decades, you can't figure that out?
Yeah, it's been a while, but I don't know that we've settled on exactly Reaganites or Reaganauts. But anyway, Reaganistas, like Gingrich, and as Chris Matthews, of course, always has to hearken to either Kennedy or Nixon, compared it to the mink coat versus the cloth coat Republicans.
Now, did you know that it was a cultural signal where you stood on the political sociological spectrum by wearing of a fanny pack? I did not know that.
I just think it means that you have zero fashion sense. It was, I don't know if it was, I don't know if there was ever a time when you could have worn a fanny pack, but if there ever was a time, it's certainly not, 2012.
Is it some sort of something you buy things off of the Home Shopping Network? Is that the thing?
I don't know, but apparently it's some sort of a cultural signal, and what can I say? It's certainly a faux pas. But the larger point I think is interesting that whether or not you tend to like Romney or you tend to prefer Gingrich says something about the kind of conservative you are, and it speaks to class and wealth and also ideology, but I think the other things may be a little bit more.
Now, this is a theme that I've been harping on over the course of our chats, that having a protracted Republican primary race was going to elevate fault lines and differences within the Republican conservative coalition that people were not aware of, possibly that Republicans weren't really aware of. Are you surprised by this dichotomy, or is this sort of an old division that conservatives are always aware of, and they're not shocked that it's being elevated right now?
I'm not shocked by it. I think it's always been around. I mean, so much of the conservative coalition, and we've talked before about like libertarian, the Ron Paul sort of thing versus the Santorum thing. I mean, there are, it's a complex thing. There are many, it's not monolithic. The conservative movement has many factions and different divisions and different types of conservatives, and it doesn't really surprise me. But I do think you're right that this election has sort of exposed those cleavages. I think that my sort of default philosophy is that debate and discussion is healthy. I mean, obviously sometimes it's not, but by and large I think it is. And I think stifling dissent and disagreement is generally unhealthy. But I'll just give you an example of something that came to light, I think, just last night, or recently, has been, like, Newt Gingrich is a big proponent of space exploration. He's a futurist. He loves, he grew up reading Isaac Asimov, and he wants to colonize the moon and all sorts of stuff, which I frankly happen to find appealing. I don't think that we should stand by and let China or other countries beat us in space. I think that space exploration kind of speaks to American ingenuity, America's drive for exploration, and there's a lot of good, healthy scientific discoveries and things that come from it. It also speaks to John F. Kennedy challenging us to go to the moon. I think the fact that Gingrich was pretty much widely mocked for this is kind of a sad statement about America's belief in exploration, and it obviously speaks to the financial troubles this nation has.
Yeah, I don't think it speaks to that. I mean, I think you have a point, and I think it's good for politicians, both policy-wise and politically, to have some kind of moonshot type goal to inspire people with. What I find sort of strange about the moon colony proposal is that it sounds like a futuristic idea from 30 years ago. At this point, you don't have this sort of great appetite. I really would like to live on the moon someday. Where but
I think you're right. But Gawker has a good piece up, which is I usually don't cite Gawker and good piece in the same sentence. But they have this is a step toward going to Mars.
What are you going to do on Mars? I mean, I think you have to at least communicate, as you say it, what the benefit would be. And Gingrich is just sort of saying it as if everyone's going to intrinsically get why it's cool. But at this point, no one does intrinsically get why it's cool. You have to at least say why.
No, I think that's true, and I think that's true of anything. But my point is that I think that Gingrich is sort of making a case that that there are things for government to do, and that being bold and investing in science and exploration is good, and perhaps a role for maybe it could be a government/private cooperation. Who knows? But I think that in the age of austerity, there is a sense that why should we do that? Let's just concede space to somebody else. And it's kind of sad and unfortunate. And look, I don't think it's the defining issue of this race, but I think it is something interesting to keep an eye on, that the notion, the very kind of Kennedy-esque notion to boldly go where no man has gone before, is mocked now by a lot of people, including, I would say, a lot of Republicans and conservatives. I mean, go back and read, the Challenger speech that Reagan delivered that was written by Peggy Noonan, where he talks, Reagan, talks to the children. He's like, now I've got a message for the school children. And he talks about how, throughout our history, we've had men who have tried to quench this appetite to explore. And some of them, have died in the process, and this is part of what makes America great. I mean, it's very much summoning our better angels and our spirit of exploration. And I think that's generally mocked today. And I think it speaks to a larger issue, not just within the Republican Party, but probably in the nation.
Well, I mean, I think it's something that Obama has tried to fight against and try to push back on the notion that America's days are over and we're just gonna passively glide into decline. He has tried to offer signature initiatives that would be uplifting, and that has generally been in the areas of clean energy and high-speed rail. And these are things that conservatives have generally attacked as picking winners and losers, the boondoggle and all that kind of austerity-type language. And I don't begrudge conservatives trying to knock their opponents over their ideas. But I don't think, and Gingrich has his counter to that. He has his space thing. He has his lunar colony thing. I don't know what Romney has like that. I don't know if Romney has any kind of inspirational initiative that would be his rallying cry.
Right. I mean, this is, I hate to say fundamentally, But this is fundamental to the race. I mean, Romney is not about any big idea. He's not a romantic, inspirational character. He is a manager who will make the trains run on time, ostensibly.
And there are definitely political
and if that's
times when
if
that
that's
can
what you're
work.
okay with, if that I think it is working, and if that's what you want, if that's what you're okay with, then you probably like Romney.
Have you read Warren Hardy's famous speech?
Is this the guy from Laurel and Hardy?
No, Warren Harding. I'm sorry, Warren Harding.
No.
In 1920, he was running
Harding.
for president.
Harding.
I'm sorry, I mumbled the name.
No. Tell us about it.
His signature campaign speech was, quote, a return to normalcy.
Oh yes. That's I think didn't he invent or coin that phrase? Was it Wilson?
So. And this is after
somebody
2 terms of Woodrow Wilson, where Wilson was pushing hard on a lot of reformist fronts and expended a lot of political capital in his second term to push the League of Nations. There had been a lot of union activity at the time. In 1919, the former mayor of my town, Northampton, Calvin Coolidge, who later became president, very famously broke a Boston police strike when he was governor of Massachusetts in a very pithy way, where he said, the right to jeopardize the public safety is wrong any place, any time. I'm botching the quote, but essentially like that. And his succinctness in dismissing the strike was very popular. There reached a point where people were frustrated with the upheaval, and so that message of just call it off, let's have some calmness right now. We've had enough, was appealing in the moment. And so I think Romney is making a bet that people will be sick and tired of a sense of upheaval. I am skeptical that Romney is right, that the moment is his for the taking. But that would be the logic behind not having a bold signature initiative and to just say, look, I'm just going to make the trains run on time.
Well, okay, so and by the way, I like that history lesson. We should inject more. That could be part of our thing here. And by the way, folks, do tell us, chime off in the comments. What do you like? What don't you like? What should we name the show? What should we do more of? But this is a good segue, I think, to the State of the Union, right? So, we're talking about Obama and how he, with high-speed rail and green jobs and whatnot. What was your take on the State of the Union?
I thought it was a great State of the Union myself, and I imagine that Republicans would probably look at that and say to themselves, this is going to be a tough guy to beat. This guy has his rap down. He has found a way to acknowledge dissatisfaction in the economy while also touting what he has done to make the economy better and what he would like to do to keep the momentum going. And the way that he talked about the Bin Laden raid. I mean, and this is sort of, I think, a matter that political junkies have sort of been watching. How is he going to talk about it? How is he going to exploit it for his evil political purposes? And I think he found a way to talk about it in a way that was not crudely self-serving. It was not just simply, hey, I bagged this guy, vote for me. It was, what does this raid tell us about what American can do? And that sort of speaks to our earlier conversation. So he talks about the raid at the very end of the speech, not in terms of his own decision-making, but in terms of what the individuals in the raid actually did to work together, to work collectively in the heat of battle to accomplish a mission.
It was interesting too, Bill. As far as I recollect, most State of the Unions start with domestic policy, unless it's like right after 9/11 or something.
Right.
And this one started with, foreign policy / defense, and ended with that. And the larger chunk was domestic policy in the middle, but it started and ended with foreign policy /
well, because those foreign policy successes are, there are certain things I think that Obama has that are just indisputable. Bin Laden's dead, Gaddafi's gone, auto industry's safe. Those are just indisputable things. and there are things that Obama can either explicitly or implicitly say, these things that I did on my watch, I didn't negotiate it and compromise, I just did it. And that at least gives a sheen of competency, which I think makes it easier for him. Everyone's sort of, how can a guy win re-election if the unemployment rate's over 8%? No one's done that, in 80 years. And the way he might be able to do it is to say, hey, I'm a competent guy. I've shown you my competency. And what I've done on the economy has been as good as I can do considering what I've had to work with. Give me another term, give me a better Congress, and I'll do even more because you can trust at least what I do is being done in a competent way. So I thought he blended those aspects of his record in a way that are going to help him make that case. That doesn't mean that he's infallible or there's no weak spots to attack or whatnot. But
let me ask you this, Bill, because first of all, I agree with pretty much everything you've said. I think that it was a very good political. I mean, I could certainly disagree with him over the policy and over some of the things he said. But I think it was a great political speech. It actually reminded me of Bill Clinton's 97, probably like 97. So I think it was sort of a triangulation type speech. I mean, here's what used to happen to me a lot of times when I would listen to Obama, and I would try to think, like, what if I'm a conservative-leaning, just average guy in the middle of the country? There would always be, you're listening, oh, I like that, that's good. And then there would be something very dissonant that would, like, just rub you the wrong way. Maybe it was, like, blaming Bush, or there would always be something he had to stick in there that was kind of petty, or he would brag overtly about something that would just rub you the wrong way and undermine sort of all the goodwill he had engendered. There was none of that. This speech could have been delivered by, 80% of this speech could have been delivered by a Republican, and it lacked any of those moments that would turn off a conservative-leaning but average sort of swing voter. But my question to you, Bill, is, did this bother liberals? Were there any liberals, or even you, who felt like this guy's about to pull a Clinton on us?
Not by me. And just talk about I think this speech is very different than Bill Clinton's 1996 State of the Union address, where he famously said the era of big government is over. Now Clinton actually tried, after he said that, to talk about a vision of smarter, more efficient government, which is very similar to what Obama said, too, and what Obama said in several of his State of the Unions. But to have the dramatic line be a very right-leaning line.
Right. Well, there really were no dramatic lines. I mean, he had the line about the spilled milk, which was incredibly lame. But there weren't any big, highfalutin rhetoric. There were no great, memorable lines. But it was just a very good speech with a lot of stuff. That's what reminded me of Bill Clinton. Because frankly, with Bill Clinton, the era of big government is over, and I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky, are really the two most memorable. He's sort of like a great rock guitarist, where he was technically great, but no riffs that you would ever remember. That's kind of how Bill Clinton, and I feel like that's how Obama's speech was. No great lines. Per se.
No great lines, but I think the subtext of the speech, and it's interesting that nothing jumped at you that would rub a right-leaning voter the wrong way. I still think the overarching theme of the speech is that there is a place for active government to make the economy better. He wasn't trying to downplay or throw away his basic ideological reason of being and difference between him and the eventual Republican nominee. And so in that sense, it wasn't a triangulating speech. And so I think because of that, you did not see a lot of overt criticism from the left. I mean, there's plenty of liberals out there that are more negative about Obama than I am. But even when you go to those folks, there are definitely things in the speech that raise an eyebrow at them. He still had a nod towards deficit reduction that a lot of liberals don't like. He had his nod towards oil and gas domestic exploration, which a lot of liberals did not like. So there's still elements of that in there. But you didn't have a broad, angry pushback from the left after the speech, partly because I think of the overarching theme, partly because he embraced this new investigation of the banks and the housing crisis that my group, Campaign for America's Future, along with Move On, and Credo, and some other groups, had laid a marker on. There was some anxiety that he was going to embrace a settlement with the banks over the housing crisis that a lot of folks from the left were going to say was be a whitewash. He didn't do that. He embraced the new investigation. He tapped Eric Schneiderman, the New York Attorney General, who the left has really been rallying behind, who has been opposing a settlement. And so that also made whatever nods to the right Obama did make go down a lot easier with folks on the left. That doesn't mean there won't be complaining later on, depending on what tax he takes. But the overarching thrust of the speech, combined with that bank investigation thing, made the balance of the speech very acceptable for folks on the left.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on it. Probably a good place to stop.
I think so. We both have busy days ahead.
That is right, but luckily no debate tonight.
We're free for a month, I guess.
Who do you got in the Super Bowl? Are you going with the Patriots or the Giants?
Well, I live in Massachusetts, but I was born in New York. So I can never I will never root for a New England team. Period. I cannot do that. Two, I'm kind of done with professional sports. Period. So I haven't really been invested in it. I don't really care. I'm an Aussie rules football man, and that's pretty much as far as I go. That and minor league baseball is as far as I go.
All right.
Do you have a favorite?
Well, I mean, I don't have a favorite. I think you got to predict the Patriots this time because the last time they played in the Super Bowl, the Giants won. Two great teams, law of averages. So I think that the Patriots will win. I think the interesting thing is that if Eli Manning, if the Giants win the Super Bowl, Eli Manning will have won more Super Bowls than his brother Peyton Manning.
Right.
Which I think is very interesting because I think Peyton is
no one thinks Eli's a better quarterback.
Right. Well, Peyton is widely considered to be an elite quarterback, or at least he was, and Eli is people, despite the fact that he very well may win 2 Super Bowls, people are sort of like, yeah, he's okay. So,
although if he wins 2, everyone's going to say this shows that whatever technical deficiencies, he's a clutch player, and he is a leader, and he knows how to bring a team together. What it really just means is that life isn't fair.
That is true. That is very true. Life is not fair. I think we can.
I'll end that on that Burkean note.
All right, man. Good talking.
You too. Take care.